Hi, and welcome back to Running Rants with Helen. As always, I'm Helen, and as you can see, I am not running. I ran the Tarawera 102k yesterday, so we're at a walk today, but we're still in Rotorua, and we're in the Redwoods, which we ran through yesterday too. I also can't really put on socks. I kind of have tis but a flesh wound, and then that one's kind of oozing too, and my pinky toenails are gonna fall off. But yeah, I took off my whole shoe was bloody, and then I took it off and I thought I had like a giant blood blister. Maybe I can insert a picture, but turns out it was like not liquid inside. I tried poking it with a safety pin and it was just like flesh in there. So I don't really know what happened. I tried Googling it, but apparently I'm the first person that's ever happened to. Or maybe if you Google the word fleshy blood blister, you don't get results. So running rants turned to walking rants, and now we're on sitting rants. So a little over walking. Also, I get really nervous when we film in front of people, and I said, oh no. So now I'm just sitting in the woods. But yeah, I guess I'll go over the race and then probably all of the things that happened to my body, maybe my nutrition, and then I'll talk about the Western States Golden Ticket that I got. So yeah, I came into this race thinking I could run about a 9-hour 50K, or 9-hour 100K, and I did. I ran 9:03, and so I ran pretty much the exact time that I thought I could, which was, I think, 12 minutes under the previous course record that Ruth had set, but the course is different, and so I think this one was a lot faster, honestly. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, like 7 of you guys went under course record, but I don't know, I think this course is a lot faster. But it was really cool. Like, we got to run through the jungle and past a waterfall and like past a bunch of lakes, which was awesome. And Rick always like sends me little texts before the race, and usually it'll be like a mantra, and I think about it a lot when I'm racing, and I'll write it on my bib. And he said, like, be focused, be present, and be grateful. And so every time I would like start thinking too far into the future, I would like come back to that and like think about how grateful I was to be out there. It's like something that they said about this race that I thought was really cool is like, yeah, it's a competition like against people, but honestly, like most of the race I was alone. And so they kind of talked about how it's like more of a celebration of like your interaction with the land and with like these other people who also enjoy the trails. And so I thought that was like a cool special thing, but it was fun. We got to start the race off and like run through a field and steeple jump some fences. And then it was like pretty much rolling like gravel roads for probably like 30K. And then but then it opened up, and I actually got really hot, and we were like 26 miles in, and I thought, oh no, because I think that was probably like my lowest part of the race was like probably 26 miles to like 50K. And I was like, man, I would love to be running a 50K right now. I got pretty hot, but I brought an ice bandana, and so the aid stations that had ice, I was able to fill it. But Jacob, my boyfriend and videographer, he was also running the 100K, and so we didn't have any crew, which I think was totally fine, except normally like I would have crew have ice, and so I think that was like mostly just the main thing. And then I had all of my nutrition bottles in my pack, and I think from bouncing they like bruised my back, so that's been really fun trying to sleep. But yeah, it pretty much spread out like kind of towards the beginning where maybe like, it was before marathon mark. There's like a huge group of us, probably like 8 or 9 women. And Beth Mackenzie had like already gone off the front, and I saw Ruth Croft make a move, and I knew, I was like, that's the move. If I'm gonna like try, I've got to go now. And so Ruth went, and Caitlin Fielder went, and Nancy Zhang went, and I tried to go with them, and I was able to stay in that group. Ruth was like off the front a little bit, and then there's like a pretty technical descent, and that's where I passed Nancy, and then I just never caught up to like Caitlin, Ruth, and Beth. I like never saw them, which is fine. That's like sometimes how it goes. I went out pretty hard, but I think we all did, and part of that like risk is dying a slow, painful death. I just like, my fitness isn't where theirs is right now, and like that's totally fine. Like it's February and I'm happy like with the time that I ran and how I ran, like given all things considered, which everyone has all the things considered. And then Nancy actually passed me. I think it was probably like 15, maybe a little bit less to go, like 15K to go. And she passed me so fast. I was like, man, that's the end. And I had already kind of realized, like, because Beth was at least like 12 minutes up on me at that point, and like with how fast I was running, I was like, I'm probably not going to catch her. So like I would much rather get 4th place than 5th place. And yeah, she passed me, and I thought that was it. But at the start of the Redwoods section, there's like a pretty steep climb. I would say probably one of the only like non-runnable sections of the course. And so she was hiking, and I was able to catch her and pass her on like that hiking part. And from where I had passed her earlier in the race, like I realized that my downhill legs were like just a little bit faster. And so I just like threw myself down the stairs because I was like, well, if I fall, at least I get to be done now. And so that was like where I put in like the most time, I think. And then at the very end, you run through all of like the sulfur beds, and I thought I was going to throw up. It was like so hot and so smelly, and that was tough. But Nancy did not catch back up, which I was really happy about. I think she ended up running like 9:10. Yeah, and then nutrition wise, I just carried all of my own stuff. I just didn't have water in my bottles of nutrition, and so I did Roctane. I used the tropical flavor, which has caffeine, and then I used strawberry hibiscus, which I really like. I feel like it tastes like Jolly Ranchers. And then I used like 5 or 6 different flavors of goo that were like all fruity, and I did a pretty good job of eating until the last hour. I kind of fell off, but I calculated all of my carbs this morning, and I think I was at like 65 grams of carbs an hour, and I usually aim for like 60 to 70 at this point. I just haven't gotten to the point where I don't throw up. But Jacob and I have also talked about like throwing up as a choice, and then as a second choice to let that throw up leave your body. And so I threw it in my mouth a couple of times, and I only let it leave my body once, and that's just because it really caught me off guard and by surprise. And so I think I did a pretty good job with that. I was stoked of like no absolute projectile vomiting. Like they were just baby barfs, so I feel like that's chill. Yeah, and then I guess like body things, like 50K in, I was like, man, my feet hurt. And I was like, that is too bad. It's a little early. And then at one point I looked down and I was like, man, my shoe is red. I must have like stepped in some mud. I'm sure it's fine. Because it was actually like my left shoe was bloody, turns out, but my right foot hurt more. So I was like, I don't know. And then I got to the end and I was like, oh yeah, my shoe is bloody. And I thought I had a giant blood blister. But yeah, like I talked about at the beginning, it was just fleshy. So now I just have a hole in my toe. And then I bruised my ribs from my bottles. Like right here is really, really sore. And then my right arm hurts. Like I think my arm hurts way more than like my legs or any other part of my body. It's probably like the last 12 miles. Like I have no clue why. It still hurts and don't really know what to do, but my legs feel fine. Like my quads are good. And I don't know if it's just like, because some of the descents were like kind of steep and I ran like the whole time, but maybe there just like wasn't enough vert, because I think it was only like 7,000 feet in like the 63 miles, which is relatively very flat. So I have no idea, but my legs honestly feel pretty fine. It's just like my toes hurt and my arm hurts and my back is bruised. But yeah, I don't know. It was like really cool to be out there. Like I had I had a lot of fun. I also like didn't have a lot of fun, but I think that's just part of ultras. Like, I don't know, 60 miles is really far to run, and I think sometimes I forget that because it's just like really normalized around me. But also, like, I'm just really happy I finished this race because last year, like, I tried to run 2 races over 50K and I DNF'd both of them. And I have DNF'd 3 races in my trail running career, and I would like to never do that again. It feels so bad. So I'm really happy that I finished and that I broke that because like I know that I can run over 50K and I think I can do it pretty well. But I think to get better at it, you also kind of have to practice because I'm never going to be in those places where like my mind goes and where my body goes in training just because it's so far. And I think that there's always like little tricks you have to play on your mind. Like there's one section where I was having my low at like 30 miles and I just kept thinking like, oh, this is hard. But then like my brain, the next thing I would say is like, I am strong, I am fast, I am cold. And I just kept telling myself that. And so I feel like that kind of helps too, even though like I know it's not true, but if you're thinking that, like maybe you might think it's true somewhere in there. Yeah, it was like fun to be out there. I wish maybe I got to like spend more time running with people, but at the end of the day, I don't know, I think I did exactly what I thought I could, and I think it's pretty hard to be disappointed with that. Oh, and then also because this is a golden ticket race, so if you it's normally top 2 get tickets, but it'll roll all the way down to 5th. And so Ruth said she didn't want to run states. Caitlin Fielder took a ticket. It went to Beth McKenzie, but she served a doping violation ban like from WADA in 2016 or something in triathlon. So Western States actually won't let her in. And so then it rolled down to me. And the ticket was huge. I'll insert a picture, but it was literally like as big as me, which is really fun because the one I got at CCC was like 8.5 by 11. And I was like, man, this isn't even like real ticket size. And then this one was like huge. So I feel like it kind of evened it out in the realm of tickets. And so I took it home. Jacob and I tried to put it in the car. It was also too big for the car. I'll also put a photo in there, and there's like no way I was going to be able to actually get it home. And I kind of wanted to think about it a little bit, but I turned it down today. And so it rolled down to 5th place. Nancy, who has run states, and she seems super stoked on it. And so I'm excited to see how she does. And I'm still excited to be at states, just not racing. Hopefully I'll be pacing and crewing. My friend MK, who got her golden ticket the week before at Black Canyon. And who knows, maybe like the 3rd ticket. If I get a 3rd one, I'll hold on to it long enough to actually sign up for the race. But I think I just already had my summer plans, and I don't know that I want Western States to be my first 100-miler, and it's also really hot. And I think generally I don't do that well in the heat, and I'm not really willing to heat train. And so it makes it a little tricky for races like that. So I will not be running Western States, but I don't know, it's fun to get tickets. I hope that someday if I decide I want to run that race, that I'll be able to race my way in to kind of earn my spot. And yeah, I guess like that is my recap for the Tarawera 102k. Any questions?
Yeah. Okay, so I think initially when we found this race and we were looking at signing up, it didn't seem like there was a ton of depth at the front of the field for the women's race, and it seems like it like really came together in the last month or two, probably because it's a golden ticket race. So how does that change the dynamic at that front end of a women's race when there's something like a golden ticket on the line, like strategically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like going into it, Ruth had already said she wasn't going to take it. And so I think that can sometimes change the dynamics because it's like, will people like potentially go with her or with whoever's at the front and like risk blowing up? Or like, are people going to try to kind of play it safe knowing that it'll roll down? I mean, I personally, like, I wasn't here for the ticket, and so I think, like, personally, I'm always going to, like, try within the best of my ability to, like, be in the mix for the front of the race, whether or not a ticket is on the line, just because, like, I'm here to race people. But I think that can kind of change the dynamic, and then, like, thinking of, like, who is going to take it, who isn't, and, like, where that could go. And so I think sometimes, like, people could just try to play it safe and, like, get within the top 5, but I don't think that's really what happened in this race. It seems like everyone just kind of went for it, which is pretty cool. And I don't know, in years past, it usually seems to be like maybe like 2 or 3 deep. And this year, I think there's like more depth in the women's field. And so I think that was pretty cool. And also just generally, I think 48% of the entire field was women. And so that's like not super heard of in longer distances in most of the races that I do. So I feel like that was really cool too.
Why do you keep turning down golden tickets? And like, why don't you want to run Western States right now?
I think that, like, to do well in really long races, and 100 miles is really long. Like, I've talked about it a little bit. There's like the desire to want to win a race and the desire to want to run a race, and I think you need both of them to win. And I would love to win Western States. Like, obviously that would be sick. But if I think about it outside of that, like, how much do I really want to run that race? And like, the answer is not, I don't really. And I think it has like a lot of cool history, which is awesome. And I'm always like so thankful that I get to be a part of like other people's days, like either crewing or pacing, which I feel like makes it a lot of fun, and it's obviously competitive. But I think one of the main reasons I would want to run it is I would get to sleep in my bed the night before, and that's not a good enough reason to run 100 miles for me. Like, I could technically go do that any day of the week if I really wanted to. And so I think I'm just like not at the point where I like have a deep desire to want to run that race, because I think it's a really fast course, and so maybe someday, like, if I want to see how fast I could run 100 miles, I think it could be a cool option. Or like, if I want more like little hurdles, like, oh, it's hot and so I have to figure that out, or like all of these other little things. But I think just right now it's not super interesting to me, and so maybe someday it will be.
So coming into this race, you're kind of coming off of winter training, so you have relatively low running volume compared to what you've done in the past, and then you've got some ski volume mixed in there. Talk about like how things went based on training at a little bit lower volume, and like I know you were kind of eyeballing some of your competition, and just talk about like your mindset and how your training played out, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I feel like going into running 100K, like whenever I've gone into CCC, which I've only run 300Ks, and all of them have been in like August or September. And 2 of those 3 were CCC. And so I have like the whole summer to build. And so I feel like I'm normally at like pretty high volume, like hours wise and miles wise. And this time I think my peak week, I did run 80 miles, but other than that, I was like in mid 50s, maybe 60s. And I feel like sometimes it can be tricky, like looking at your competitions training and then be like, oh my God, like they've run 100-mile weeks like the last 8 weeks, or like they're hitting all of these numbers and like I'm not. And I think sometimes it can like kind of like take away from your confidence. But I think this was just a good reminder that like I don't need to be doing what everyone else is doing, and running more doesn't always mean you're going to race better. And I mean, I learned that especially this past year at UTMB. Like, I think on paper my training looked really good, but I felt so tired, and obviously that race didn't go well. And I think like that's something that Rick and I kind of took away from that is I run better and I race better when I'm happy and not completely shattered in training. And it's also February. Like, I have like a long season and a lot of plans that like go all the way into October, and so I don't need to be like peaking my training now, especially if I want to like still feel good then. And like now I get a little bit of a break because I don't normally run like February races, and I even wasn't really skiing that much. And so yeah, I think it's just like was a really good reminder for me that like it doesn't really matter what other people are doing. It doesn't matter if someone's putting in twice as many hours as you. Like, that doesn't set anything in stone, because these races are long and literally like anything can happen. And I think that like your mindset and like a lot of things and your nutrition like all play an important role in how you do. And like obviously preparation matters. You can't just do nothing, but like more doesn't always mean better.
Give your Yelp review of Tarawera Ultra for
Okay.
people that might be interested.
Tarawera Yelp review, 5 stars out of 5 stars. I think it was really cool. I don't know, it was hot and it was beautiful, and we got to run past a waterfall, and there was literally photographers there, and there's no one around me. And so I just had to tell them, I said, dudes, this is sick. Because it is. It was like so beautiful and so cool, and like always I just feel like so lucky that like I got to be a part of it. And like the community here is super nice. Like I don't know if it's all of New Zealand, but everyone is just so nice and friendly, and yeah, I love it. I don't know if I'll run 100k in February again, but I would definitely run the 50k. And yeah, I think if you want like a PR in any distance, this is a good place to do it. It was net uphill though. I think we gained like 7,000 feet, but only lost like 5, which maybe that's why my quads are fine. But yeah, I think it's like a great place to like run a PR and have a great time. All the aid stations were like spaced perfectly. There were even like water tables that like weren't on the map, and so that was very exciting. But yeah, I've had a great time, and I think just like the reason for this race and like the way that they talk about it is like super cool too, that it's like not just a race.
Briefly touch on recovery. Like, what do you do after something like how do you feel? What do you do? And like how do you know when it's time to start getting back to it?
Yeah, currently I feel very bad. I do feel better than I did last night. It is kind of funny, like when you and your partner both do the same thing, because then it's like, oh man, we are both useless. And we're both like, it hurts so bad. Why did we do this? But I feel a lot better today. Yeah, I feel like the keys are like, try to sleep the most you can. I always have a hard time sleeping the night after a race just because it's hard to get comfortable and I feel like pretty restless. And I don't like when my toes touch the blanket when they hurt so bad. And then I feel like just eating a lot, and then like, yeah, trying to get the best sleep you can. And I'm not normally one to rush back into training. I feel like I usually get a little restless after like 4 or 5 days, but Rick is really good about keeping me in line even when I think that I'm ready to run, and even when like your body feels okay. Sometimes you go for a run and you're like, oh my god, like that felt so awful. And so I feel like he's really good about like communicating with me and like, hey, we're actually like going to take a full 2 weeks like not running and like maybe just some hiking. And I feel like that helps like in recovery long term, so then I don't get like injured or little niggles. And I mean, I'm not racing again probably until June, so I have a big nice gap in there to not be in training and to just enjoy outside and whatever feels good. This has been a special edition of Running Rants with Helen called Sitting Rants with Helen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.